The fantastical trinity of American childhood: Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. As children, we're brought up to believe in these magical gift givers in hopes of instilling a sense of wonder and a sense of morality in us. Children generally stop believing in these mythical figures at around the age of 7 or 8. But why do we believe in them in the first place? Where do these traditions come from? And when did they arise in our collective consciousness? In this video, we will explore these very questions. Santa Claus is a large, jolly old man with a big white beard and a red coat. He lives in the North Pole, has a workshop full of elves, a pack of flying reindeer, and every Christmas Eve he flies all across the world giving presents to children. He seems like quite the character, but how did he come to be? Most of us know that he's also called Saint Nick. So what, he's a Christian saint? He seems quite different from all the other saints we know. Well, he is in part. The modern Santa Claus is an amalgamation of 4 different characters from European history and folklore: Saint Nicholas, Sinterklaas, Father Christmas, and the pagan god Odin. Saint Nicholas was an actual historical person. He lived in the 4th century and was the bishop of Myra, which is in modern-day Turkey. Not much is actually known about the historical saint, but there are many stories of him performing miracles as well as secretly giving gifts, which is where Santa Claus's penchant for gift-giving comes from. Saint Nicholas, however, did not give gifts to children. He mostly gave money to the poor and those in need. The most famous story of his generosity is the story of the 3 dowries, in which St. Nicholas secretly paid the dowries of 3 young women so that they could be married and not fall to prostitution. Because of St. Nicholas's famed generosity, a figure arose in the Netherlands called Sinterklaas. Sinterklaas is essentially based entirely on St. Nicholas, and there's little magic surrounding him like there is with the modern Santa Claus. On December 6th, the feast day of St. Nicholas, Sinterklaas rides through the streets on a white horse, dressed in his clerical garb, and throws candy and cookies to the children. He is joined by Zwarte Piet, a chimney sweep who punishes bad children by hitting them with his broom. Zwarte Piet has come under fire in recent years for his association with blackface. Traditionally, the Dutch public denied that the figure was racist, but in the last few years the opinion has shifted. There have been efforts recently to have the people playing Piet simply be covered in soot and not actually painted black. Another pre-Santa figure comes from jolly old England, and his name is Father Christmas. Nowadays, Father Christmas is essentially synonymous with Santa Claus, and some British people may not even know that they are different, but traditionally, they're not the same. Father Christmas is the personification of Christmas. He's represented as an old man wearing green with a wreath of holly on his head. You may recognize him as the ghost of Christmas Present from Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. Unlike Santa, he's more interested in merrymaking and drinking wine than actually giving presents to children. The tradition started in the 15th century and had a resurgence in the 17th century as a backlash against the English Puritans who had outlawed Christmas, seeing it as Catholic and pagan, and against Christian values. The Puritans may have actually had a point in calling the tradition pagan, as it is now theorized that Father Christmas may have been based, at least in part, off the Germanic god Odin. Odin was the father of the gods in Norse mythology, and there is evidence that he, or a god similar to him by the name of Woden, was worshipped by the English Anglo-Saxons before they were Christianized. He was associated with the midwinter festival of Yule, a holiday that has been absorbed into modern-day Christmas. So basically, Santa Claus is a combination of the English Father Christmas, who may have been based on Odin, and the Dutch Sinterklaas, who comes from St. Nicholas. But that only explains a few parts of the mythology, like the gift-giving, the general look, and his name. What about the rest? The reindeer, the elves, the North Pole? Well, those are modern, or at least more modern additions. The reindeer are first mentioned in the famous poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, also known as A Night Before Christmas, by Clement Clarke Moore. In fact, many parts of the Santa Claus myth were either created by or recorded by that poem. It is also partly responsible for the Christmas elves. In the poem, Santa himself is described as an elf, for how else would he fit down the chimney? Lastly, the North Pole. The idea that Santa lives in the North Pole started from illustrations done by the artist Thomas Nast at the beginning of the last century for the magazine Harper's Weekly. During this time, Arctic exploration was all the rage, so Nast thought it would be fun to put Santa up there too. On to the bunny. The Easter Bunny is a rabbit that comes every Easter to give colorful eggs and candy to children. The tradition was started by German Lutherans in the 16th century. Originally, the Easter Bunny was similar to Santa in the sense that it only gave eggs and candy to good children, though the morality tale seems to have stopped in modern times. But the question arises, why a bunny and why eggs? I mean, rabbits don't lay eggs, do they? Well, both rabbits and eggs were seen in pagan cultures as signs of fertility and birth and were symbols of springtime. The Germanic goddess Oester, also called Ostara, for whom Easter gets its name, had a festival in the spring as well, which over time morphed into the Christian holiday. Her symbols were the rabbit and eggs, though it's important to note that not a whole lot is known about Oester, and the information we have about her comes from later Christian writers, so the connections may not be as straightforward as they seem. Rabbits and eggs also had specifically Christian symbolism as well. Bunnies, ironically, were a symbol of purity. It was believed, because rabbits reproduce so much, that they might actually be hermaphroditic and were able to reproduce asexually. Because of this, they were associated with the Virgin Mary, who was said to have bore Jesus before having sex. Eggs were used as a symbol of Christ's resurrection. The eggshell was seen as a tomb, and the chick that came out of the tomb was like Christ rising from the dead. Eggs were usually dyed red to represent the blood of Christ. Unlike Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, whose origins are relatively clear, the Tooth Fairy is more of a mystery. The Tooth Fairy is a fairy, usually depicted as female, who comes and takes the baby teeth of children and leaves some money behind as compensation. It is a much more recent phenomenon, starting in the early 20th century and only becoming widespread in the 1920s and 30s. Superstitions about baby teeth and how to dispose of them have gone back centuries, however, and exist in almost every culture in the world. Common rituals tend to fall into two camps. Ones where the child throws the teeth somewhere, like in a fire, onto the ground, or into the air, and ones where the teeth are left for something, like a dog or most commonly a mouse. In much of Europe, it is customary to leave the tooth under a pillow for a mouse to come and take it. These mouse myths predate the Tooth Fairy, so it's fair to say that the Tooth Fairy came from this myth. So why did it change to a fairy, and where did the money exchange even come from? In the early to mid-20th century, the motif of the good fairy had become popular in American culture due to movies like The Wizard of Oz and Disney movies like Cinderella. It is plausible, therefore, that the Tooth Fairy was simply part of that wave of popularity. As for the gift of money, that practice perhaps goes back the furthest. In Northern Europe, giving money for baby teeth is a recorded practice as far back as the 13th century, as baby teeth were seen as good luck charms. Viking warriors would often wear them to battle. So now you know the origins of these magical gift-giving characters. Make sure to keep this video away from the kids, and thanks for watching. Hello, thanks a lot for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you want to, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Bye.